continuing on, we're going to want to update our shooting here. So when I click on my mouse, we know that it's going to shoot off in whatever direction I'm currently facing in. I already changed it so it shoots exactly where the mouse cursor is to give us very precise kind of aiming. So we're going to continue to expand on my player attack guy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a vector. I suppose it'll have to be, let's see, if we put in vector 2, we'll just see does this work. Called direction. So I'm going to calculate the direction between the player and the mouse, and then I'm going to use that direction as being the kind of direction that's used in my projectile velocity. Okay. So in my update here, basically what I want to be able to do is subtract the mouse position from my current position. And that'll give us a vector, and that vector will be, basically the direction between these two objects. So getting the actual input position, getting the mouse position is actually a little bit tricky. So there is a guy here called input.mouse position, but this is not, this can change. This is current mouse position in pixel coordinates. This isn't X or Y on the screen of where it is. It's not in the game, so we can't compare the position of something that's on our screen in screen space and something that was known as being in world space. So we're going to have to convert this mouse position to be, theoretically in the game, beside the player, wherever the mouse is currently handled over. So we're going to have to skip over a load of stuff here, but we're going to have to use a camera to do this. So the camera is going to have loads of information. So the position of the camera, the aspect ratio, how it's being projected, all that information has been stored there. So we're basically going to go from screen space down like into view space, down into world space. So there's different transformations taking place here, and the camera's going to do it for us. So it just wants to know, hey, what position do you want to convert? I'll say, hey, it's going to be my input mouse position. Okay, so that's going to give me back a vector 3. So if I say that position minus my transformed position, that's fine. Let's see if I direction is equals to that. Oh, it does work perfect because we don't need the z-axis on this. So what I'm just saying is, hey, get the position of the mouse, get the position of the player, and subtract the two of them, and that's going to give me a vector aiming between those two guys. So all I got to do is come down here, change that to direction. And if it's using the opposite direction, that means you just got to swap in your subtraction. You just got to swap those around. Now we're going to notice it's absolutely flying off. In fact, the closer my mouse is, the slower the projectile is. We're going to notice that. And the reason that is because when I calculate in that direction, the bigger the direction, or the further the mouse is from the object, the bigger the direction is, the faster the projectile is going to go. Not very maybe not very useful for us here within games. So what we're going to use is normalized. So I'm going to keep all these values between 0 and 1. So it's basically going to scale down this vector. So these could be like values in the thousands, and it'll scale everything down to keep the exact same ratios, but it'll keep it all between the values or the range of 0 to 1. So now it doesn't make a difference how far away that mouse is going to be. The maximum value for it is always going to be 1. Okay, perfect. And of course now we have a consistent speed for all of our projectiles. We're able to hit stuff and move around. We need to start cleaning up these projectiles because they are taking up a lot of space over here. Now Unity has what's known as a pooling system, and we can write pools to reuse objects. This is summer camp, so we are just going to destroy stuff, A, after a certain period of time, and B, when they collide with something. So let's write a method here, a custom one. And do between start and update. It's going to have no return type, so it's going to be void, and I'm just going to call it kill. Okay. And inside here, I'm going to call Unity's destroy method, and what Unity wants to know is, hey, what game object do you want to destroy? So I'm saying destroy this game object. Oh no, don't destroy me. What am I saying? This is in a completely wrong place. I need to create a new script. Apologies. So create a new C# script. I will just call it projectile. Okay. So I'm going to go to my projectile prefab and I'm going to add that guy on. And then we can open it up. So now I'll put in my kill method. Oh. So the destroy method takes in a game object. You can pass in any game object you want. So if this hits another object, I could destroy the other object if I wanted it there. But right now, I'm going to say destroy game object. Destroy this current game object that the script is attached to. And it's attached to the projectile. So if this is called, it'll destroy the projectile. So we want to pick, say, A. After 2 seconds, a projectile is going to destroy itself. So you can write in the update, you can write like a timer, and you can measure how much time has passed. And then we say, right, well, if we're over 2 seconds, we can destroy it. Or we can create a public float here, so it can be tweets, and I'll call it lifetime. I'll say it'll be 2 seconds. In here, then, you usually have a method called invoke, and given the name of a method, it will invoke it after a period of time that you provide. So after 2 seconds, Unity will call the kill method, which will then destroy this game object. And we can test if this is working. So we want to make sure that it's on your projectile prefab. So prefabs, projectile, I can see my speed there, so perfect, or my lifetime. I'll set it to 2 seconds. And I'll shoot it off. And looking on the left-hand side here, it should start to disappear. So keep an eye on that scene hierarchy. It's starting to fill up, but they all eventually disappear. So that's great. That'll get rid of them after 2 seconds. What happens if they hit an object? And this is the first time we're going to see another built-in Unity method that isn't provided to us here straight away. And I'm going to have to think a little bit about this. I think it is on trigger enter 2D zone that we want. But to know, if we're using a collider, you're going to have on collision enter. But if you have it set to a trigger, we're going to use on trigger enter. There's different methods that Unity provide for this stuff. So on trigger enter 2D. Now I want to test something here. So I wanted to say, hey, when you collide with something in this method, I want to just write out a message in Unity for me. So I just want to see what happens. Those boxes have colliders on them that are not set to triggers, but my projectile has a trigger. So I want to make sure which one I actually have to use here. So it is writing out hit, I can see. Now it's also recognizing the fact that it's hitting me, the player, which is fine. So what if we wanted to, okay. So that is working. So I'm going to say, look, as long as you hit something that isn't the player. Now there's another way to do this. Just know there's layers here, and we can put them in separate layers if you want. But again, trying to keep it simple. So it's going to be a decision to be met here. So that tag that we're setting for these game objects up the top there, player, projectile, and that kind of stuff, we can access that in code. And when two objects collide, you're going to notice a parameter is now provided in this method. That means that Unity is providing information on the collision that has happened, and through that we can access the other object that we hit. So I can say, hey, well, look, collision.game object. So what? Get the game object that I just collided with. It has a tag property here. That's a string. And there's two ways to do this. You can say, well, look, if the tag is equal to this or it's not equal to that, do something. But the recommended one is compare tag. And I'm going to say, look, hey, as long as the object we hit, that'll say, well, if it's player, do this. But I'm going to put in a not here. So I'm going to say, as long as the thing that we collide it with is not the player, that is my exclamation point here, I want you to come in and do something for me. And what I want to do is I want you to kill the actual projectile. So if it hits any other object other than the player, it's going to destroy itself. Okay, because when it was spawning off first, it's a trigger, it spawned onto the player, it's going to collide with the player immediately. But now we got that up and running. And what we're going to be doing inside here then as well, well, look, if it's not the player, we're going to have to add in more logic here a little bit later. Want to do an explosion and that kind of stuff. You can actually do the explosion now, I suppose. So we got our projectiles, it's now destroying itself. Let's see what happens when we actually destroy it. So I'm going to take this explosion animation that I had, and we're going to create an animation for it. I'm going to drag it in, and I'll just call it explosion. I want to see how small that is. It's probably tiny. You can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. That'll be okay. Now the reason I left it as white is so that I could come in here and actually just tweak the colors. So if I want different color projectiles later on, I can just change the color of that sprite here. Okay, now this guy's not actually going to have Anthem. It'll have a script in a few minutes, but right now I'm just going to change the name to be Explosion. I'm not going to give it a collider or rigid body or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to put it into my prefabs folder. Okay. So I'm going to attach a script to that guy. I'm going to call it Explosion. So when a projectile hits anything, it's going to create an explosion, and then that explosion is going to delete itself after it's finished. So Unity's animation system actually allows us to call methods in code from an animation. So we can pick the frame that we want. We can say, at this frame, I want you to try and call this piece of code. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to write a method on a class that is then attached to an explosion, so that when the explosion goes to call this method, it has to kind of be there. So it needs to be visible, so it has to be public. It has no return type, and again, I'm going to call it kill. All right, and all it's going to do here is destroy the game object of the explosion. So that's it. That's all my explosion is going to have. A method that will be called at the end of the animation that's going to destroy the game object of the explosion. So let's come back in, and I'm going to add that to my prefab. So explosion. We can have my explosion script on there. So now we actually want to edit that animation. So it should be in my sprites here. And I think it is this guy. Here's my explosion. Now you notice when I click on it, nothing happens. But we can go Window, Animation, and then there's the Animation window, which is now going to open this up. So again, I would make sure you have the animation selected down here, because as you start to move around to different animations, it'll pick, it'll load in the different ones here for you. So what we're interested in is right at the end. You can see my individual frames here actually. Now it doesn't show a preview or anything, but this is like the timeline up the top here. And we're able to add in specific things, specific events that we want to have happen. So at this one, I'm going to click, is this the last frame or is that one there? We'll see what happens when I do to this one. I want to add in an event. So it's this little box here. I'm going to see that it's actually provided me with a few little bits of info up the top here. So you can either give the name of a function or a method that we want to call, and that is the one we want, or we can pass in like floats, int, strings, other kind of data like that. So we have a method called kill. So I can just type kill directly into that box up there. And that's it. So now this animation is attached to the projectile. The animation, when it reaches the end, tells the game object, hey, if any of your scripts have a method called kill, can you call it? So when the animation finishes, it comes in here, calls kill, kill destroys the game object for me. And then we've got to test this out. So yeah, we'll drag in I suppose it should work. Okay, it would help if I actually spawned an explosion at some point. So why don't we do that from our projectile? Again, probably not the best place to put it, but we'll do as we need. So public game object, let's say explosion. So just like we did with the bullets, we're going to need like a prefab here that we can actually instantiate. Projectile. So what is the explosion game object? I'm going to drag him in here, because we're going to have to create an instance of that explosion. So I'm going to say, hey, as long as you hit something, I'm going to do inside my kill here, I suppose. Destroy game object. What we'll do is we'll instantiate my explosion first before I destroy it. So instantiate explosion at the same position of the projectile, and again, it's going to have no rotation. So now, anytime the kill method is called, an explosion is created, and then the game object is gotten rid of. Now I'm going to check the order and layer here, because I want the explosions to be over the player projectile. So I'm set him to -1, and I'm going to leave the explosion at 1 or 0, I should say. So let's see what we get. Bingo. So now we can see as it starts to shoot, it creates the explosion prefab, and then that really is just a sprite that plays an animation, and when the animation finishes, it destroys the projectile. And the projectile also spawns in that explosion as I'm hitting stuff. So we've actually done quite a bit here. We've got our player attack looking around, we've got our projectile moving, we've got explosions happening. We've seen quite a bit of code, so the instantiation of objects, we've been able to destroy stuff, we've been looking at the if statement, and there's a ton of stuff going on. So yeah, we're going to continue on with this in the next video.